moments while SPS TV takes us live. After a brief pause, I will call us to order. Okay, Tansi, Niminani Tan Uta Ayoyun, hello, thank you for being here. I'm so happy you're here. This is Director DeWolf, and I'm now calling this board special meeting to order at 3:30 p.m. Wednesday, October 14th. For the record, I'll call the roll, beginning with Director Hampson. Director Harris.
Present.
Director Hampson's here.
Thank you. Director Hersey. Director Mack. Director Rankin. Director Rivera Smith.
Present.
Okay, have any other directors joined us in that time? I only see us four, so we do have quorum. I imagine folks are in the other session. The board is now immediately going to recess the board special meeting into 2 executive sessions, with the first scheduled for 30 minutes to consider the minimum price at which real estate will be offered for sale or lease when public knowledge regarding such consideration would cause likelihood of decreased price per RCW 42.30.1101C, followed by a second executive session for 30 minutes to review the performance of a public employee per RCW 42.30.1101G, and that these two sessions will, with an anticipated end time of 4:32 p.m. Thank you all. Directors will be leaving this remote meeting now for the duration of the executive sessions. I will return to this remote meeting to make announcements should the executive sessions run past the scheduled end time, and to reconvene the board special meeting for the BTA 5 work session at the conclusion of the executive sessions. Directors, you've been provided separate call-in and Teams meeting information for our executive sessions. So please now leave this Teams meeting and join me in the separate remote meeting for the executive sessions, and making sure that you are no longer on this meeting when you enter the next session. Thank you all. per RCW 42.330.1101G was originally scheduled for approximately 30 minutes. We are running long, and sadly, the session is now expected to just go an additional 10 minutes, and I can guarantee we'll be done by that with an anticipated end time of 4:54. And thank you all for your patience. Apologies for our tardiness. Board special meeting is now reconvened at 4:50 p.m. So I just want to make sure we have directors present here. Could we just do a quick roll call? Directors, want to make sure we're all back on this call. So we'll start with Director Rivera-Smith. Director Rankin.
I'm here.
Director Rivera-Smith.
Present.
Director Mack.
Present.
Director Hersey.
Here.
Director Harris. She may be still coming over here. And this is Director DeWolf. We have a quorum, Director Mack. So from here, I will hand it over to you to chair today's BTA 5 work session. Thank you very much.
Director Hampson's here.
And I hope Ms. Wilson-Jones, if you see Director Harris join, please feel free to interrupt and let us know. This is
Sorry, Director Mack, can I interrupt just a second?
Yes.
Richard, I believe you'll be sharing the presentation if you want to go ahead and put that. Never mind, I will stop talking. And I do see Director Harris is in the meeting.
excellent.
Thank you.
Ellie, can I just confirm the presentation's up on the screen? I can't see folks.
I can see it,
Great.
Mr.
Thank
Best.
you. Thank you, Mr. Mack.
Yeah, this is Director Mack, and I'll be chairing today's BTA 5 work session as chair of the Operations Committee. From staff, we have the superintendent with us, as well as today's presenters, Chief Operations Officer Fred Podesta, Director of Capital Projects and Planning, Richard Best, and K-12 Planning Manager, Becky Asensio. I'll hand it over to Mr. Podesta in just a second to start the presentation, but I just wanted to note that there's a lot of slides. You could have printed them out if you like, and the plan is to go ahead and let staff present through. They've got some breaks at logical places, and at that point we'll do questions in alphabetical order like normal. So Mr. Podesta, thank you so much for putting this together. Take it away.
I really want to thank directors for their time. As Director Mack noted, there is a lot of material, so I'll be really quick. And our Director of Capital Projects and Planning, Richard Best, will introduce this topic, and Becky Asensio, who manages the capital planning team inside that department, will take certain subjects, and we will turn it over to Director Mack as well when we get to the subject of project ranking, so she can lead a discussion with directors about the guiding principles that are used as part of our capital levy planning. And given that there's a lot of material, I'll turn it over to Richard and ask that we get started.
Great, thank you, Fred. Well, welcome everyone, and it's exciting to come and talk with you about the BTA 5 capital levy. And I just note that we have two meeting outcomes tonight. One, we do want to create awareness surrounding our BEX and BTA capital levy planning process. We recognize that 4 school board members have not gone through the capital levy planning process with us before, and so we just wanted to create some familiarity, and thankfully 3 of your colleagues, Directors Harris, Mack, and DeWolf, were all assisted with the BEX 5 capital levy, and I believe Director Harris also assisted with the BTA 4 capital levy. And then, as Fred mentioned, we also want to begin a conversation about board guiding principles. We're not looking for those tonight, but would be asking that the board consider developing those so that you could assist our efforts, and hope to have those by January of 2021.
Mr. Best, you're muted, I think. Mr. Best.
Thank you, Director
Okay.
Mack. Sorry about
All right.
that.
No worries.
Seattle Public Schools has 104 schools, and you can see the different configurations of our schools on the screen. I will also note by the end of October, we will have our 105th school. It will have received a certificate of occupancy, and that will be Webster School. Of the 105 schools that we have, 55 of them are over 50 years old and 17 are actually over 100 years old. Of those 55, 35 are landmarked. And then in addition, we have 285 portable classrooms on those 104 school sites. I will note that I've been with the school district since 2014. And in the time that I have been with the school district, we have added 96 portable classrooms. The portable classrooms were added because really of two factors. One is obviously enrollment growth. The second factor was OSPI's class size reduction. And so BEX 4 focused on capacity projects. One of the goals of BEX 4 was to reduce portable classroom usage throughout Seattle Public Schools. We failed at that task miserably and actually have, like I said, increased our portable classrooms by 96. October enrollment of 2019 was 53,627 students. And just highlight that for you. As part of our long-range plan, we always try to address our student capacity needs. Becky Asensio, who oversees our planning department, works very closely with Ashley Davies, who oversees enrollment projections for Seattle Public Schools. One way that I find very easy to think about the work that Ashley and Becky do for Seattle Public Schools is that Ashley identifies the student and Becky identifies the seat for that student. And we spend an incredible amount of time every year making sure that every student that we believe is going to show up within Seattle Public Schools has a seat within our school district. In addition, we look at upgrading and renovating our existing facilities, and we try to do this on a predictable schedule. Also, as part of our capital levies, we have technology. 85% of the technology operational budget comes from our levies. Technology is a component of both the BEX and the BTA levies, and it is the primary funding source. So by law, our capital levy funds can be used for school construction, and they have to be separate from the general operating fund. You can see a list of the construction items that they can be used for. They can be used for purchase of portables, classroom additions, safety and security upgrades, and then also we use those funds for technology. Board policies 6900 and 6901 provide guidance to Seattle Public Schools as to how to go about forming the levies that we utilize. We have two levies, and I like to characterize our levies much like the Summer and Winter Olympics. The Building Excellence levy focuses on generally capacity, renovation of major projects. The Building Technology and Academics Athletics levy is generally a smaller levy that focuses on building systems. I will note with BTA 4, we had capacity issues, and we actually had 4 capacity projects on the BTA 4 capital levy. They were the reopening of E.C. Hughes and Magnolia and Webster schools, and then a 30 classroom addition at Ingram High School. Traditionally, prior to BTA 4 had focused on roof replacements, or BTA levies had focused on roof replacements, boiler replacements, electrical service upgrades, envelope repairs, things of that nature. Our levies are collected over a 6-year cycle, and the BEX and BTA levies offset one another every 3 years. This again is just another slide showing the focus of the building excellence and the BTA levies. One of the things we did with the BEX 5 levy that was approved by voters in February of 2019 is we identified 2 projects in which the design activities were funded only, and those were Sacagawea Elementary School and Aki Kurosi. At that time, we had hoped to fund the construction portion of those 2 projects with BTA 5. And the idea for funding those, the construction portion of those 2 schools was that they would integrate into the use of our interim sites throughout Seattle Public Schools. Seattle Public Schools has 3 interim sites. The interim site in the north portion of the district is at John Marshall, and Sacagawea would occupy John Marshall in 2027. The interim site we are creating as part of BEX 5 for the south portion of the district will be at Van Asselt Elementary School. And then the interim site we use for West Seattle is at Spitz Park Elementary School. So BTA 5 would go before the voters in February of 2022. This is just some background history of the financial amounts of the various levies that Seattle Public Schools has proposed since 1995. Quick total, you'll see that our voters have been very generous in supporting capital projects and planning's efforts with, an aggregate amount in excess of $4 billion. BEX 5 was far and away the largest levy that capital levy proposed in the state of Washington for public school districts, and looking to put together our BTA 5 levy. We're just beginning assembling that list at this moment in time, and have really no idea at this moment in time as to what that financial projection will be. When you look at the levies that have been approved by the voters by geographical region, you can see the allocations of funds. When we think of the Southeast, we think of I-90 South, and then I-5 East. The Southwest is West Seattle. The central area is the Central District, then Queen Anne and Magnolia Hills. Northwest and Northeast are separated by I-5. And so that just gives you, and are north of the Ship Canal. So gives you an idea of the geographical regions of the 5 regions that we're looking at here. You can see as a percentage of the overall aggregate levy amount where dollars have been spent on capital projects in our schools. And then the various levy elements for our buildings, construction projects. They usually are addressing poor condition through the OSBI facilities assessment, or they are addressing capacity needs for being able to seat students. And I will note that we do have elementary schools that have as many as 10 portables, and then Mercer Middle School, which is being replaced as part of the BEX 5 levy, has in excess of 20 portables on site. So technology, we address infrastructure needs, software licenses, and then operations and support. And then academics, we have art and science classrooms, special education, performance arts, and then programmatic elements that are addressed as part of our academics. And then with athletics, we address play fields with the BTA 5 capital levy. We're looking at also addressing athletic equipment. One of the things that we have not done previously in our levies is address the needs of our co-curricular programs. Example would be wrestling mats. Another example would be football sleds, as two examples. And then I will note that we have not had a playground replacement schedule either. With BEX 5, we started addressing the needs of our playgrounds, and we are in the process of developing a replacement schedule for all of our playgrounds at our elementary school and K-8 facilities. Conrad Plyler, who is a landscape architect and works for the district, has been assigned that task so that we have all of our schools on a regular replacement schedule for playgrounds. There's a recognition in capital projects and planning that play is also an important element of the academic, supporting the academic program. And so with that, I'll pause and turn it back over to you, Director Mack, to answer any questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Uh-oh, I've got an echo. I don't know who's. Mr. Best, maybe if you mute, that might help. So Director DeWolf, you're first on the list. Any questions about this section?
Yes. Can you just clarify for me? I think one of the things I'm struggling with is we are currently in obviously this pandemic, thinking differently about our education system and schools. And one thing that keeps coming up for me, and apologies, you can hear my washer in the background, but one thing that comes up for me is our lack of mental health counselors, social workers. And so recognizing that this is for capital, I see here in academic/athletics on the slide 12 where it says art/science. I guess I'm trying to think, is there any way we can get creative about actually putting or paying for more of those types of folks who provide those types of services through these types of levies? We're on the precipice here of a huge mental health tsunami after this pandemic. Just one thing I'm curious about. And that's the only question I have.
Richard, do you want me to take that question?
Sure. Chief
I'll
Berge.
try not to scare you, Richard. This is
Yes.
Jolynn Berge. So Director DeWolf, one of the things that we were able to get with the legislature is the ability to expand what gets charged to the capital project fund. And that would just mean we could move more of our maintenance costs that are covered by the general fund to the capital projects fund. So both as we talk about the budget shortfall and or as we talk about other things that we want to fund, two thoughts. We could create space by doing that now. And two, we would have to get that extended by the legislature, that authority, that expanded authority extended by the legislature as well. But that's one way to create space and open up general fund dollars to repurpose.
Thank you.
President DeWolf, I might also add is that the spaces for those kind of environments are funded. So we just recently approved the funding of the healthcare clinic at Lowell to be a part of, that was taken out of the levy fund. So maybe that's one way to think of it, one opportunity to think about. Director Hampson?
Oh, are you going in order?
Yes, I am.
Questions?
I'm trying to anyway.
Okay. So let's see. Thank you for that schedule of the percent of dollars spent in the different regions. One of the questions I have, and I fully understand that you may not have this information, but my sense would be that inclusive of things like playgrounds and other fields, is what I'm trying to say. That while during that period, I don't know if you can go back to that, we have had a higher proportion of funds spent in those areas. We were likely making up for a backlog. And so I'm curious if we ever had an estimate of what our kind of years backlog, like how long would it take to get our Southeast schools caught up with other schools in terms of their capital state. And I don't know enough about the full history to be able to kind of make that assessment or, you know, kind of generalize about it on my own. So I'm wondering if we have that data.
If I could jump in, Mr. Best, I know you have a great answer here, but I think this will be the answer to your question, Chandra, will be coming later in the presentation, because there are metrics that are used to assess conditions of buildings, et cetera. So if we can hold that conversation until after the next part of the presentation that shares that information.
Sure. And then I forgot my second question, so hopefully I'll remember it when we come back around, maybe.
I'll come back around to you. Director Harris?
Thank you. One of the questions I wanted to know an answer to, and I'm beyond proud of our guiding principles process in BEX 5. Has the concept of guiding principles been embedded in policy 6900 and 6901? And my second question is it Capital Department's aim for BTA 5? We talked about replacement on a regular schedule of playgrounds, and again, huge gratitude for including a playground element to BEX 5 so that PTSAs aren't selling donuts and shoveling dirt and or having very, very dangerous equipment that is well out of safety compliance. Do you have a sense of how we're going to ramp that up?
So I'll note, Director Harris, that we are looking at developing a replacement schedule for all of our playgrounds at all of our elementary schools and K-8 schools. We're also looking at those elements at our middle schools and high schools. While they're not playgrounds per se, they do have athletic fields, which we have done a great job of having on a replacement schedule for many levies now. And we are taking the replacement schedule that we have for our athletic fields and essentially doing that for many elements within our district facilities, playgrounds being one of them, but also looking at roofs so we can get a more systematic process to our BTA capital levies and knowing what will be sequenced and when. Roofs have a 30-year lifespan generally with the type of roof that we are installing our facilities. You know, painting a facility has a 12-year lifespan. Both of those lifespans work well with the 6-year levy process that we do, and we should get these on replacement schedules so it is not a surprise, and have a list for all 105 schools as to when their roofs are going to be replaced, when their playgrounds are going to be replaced, when their buildings are going to be painted, boilers replaced, you know, and when we're going to look at electrical services. So yes, we are working on that in our planning department right now. And our senior facilities planner and some staff are developing those schedules.
And what about
Director Harris? Yes, I can answer that question.
Principles and policy.
Yes.
Yeah, that. Yes. Yes, in the revisions when we brought on 6901, it was embedded in the previous 6901. And it is now, I can't remember if it's, I think it's still in 6900. But it was embedded there before that the board was required to do a guiding principles, which we'll talk about later in this meeting, as well as have metrics measuring whether or not the selection process of what goes onto the levy meets those goals. And we'll talk more about that later in the meeting.
And we'll also add race and equity analysis as well.
It was in BEX 5 in our guiding principles, and we'll talk about that more in the when we go over that and those metrics in a little bit.
Yeah, that was actually
Thanks
an
so much.
overarching principle in the BEX 5 levy, Director Harris.
Yeah, Director Hersey, do you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, a few. So I want to loop back to the idea that was expressed by Director DeWolf earlier around advocating for some legislative changes around what we can and cannot spend capital dollars on. I remember that being a conversation when I first transitioned on the board that I believe you and I had, Jolene. And what I guess my follow-up question along those lines would be, would that be something that you would think would be well placed in the legislative agenda? Additionally, after that, I know that this is a little bit out of the scope, but do you have a roundabout idea of, for our maintenance costs, how much do we spend on that a year? I'm just trying to get an idea of how much money would be available to be moved around before we put resources into potentially advocating for that at the state legislature.
Yeah, so I think that it's probably at least $8 to $10 million this
Great.
year. So we have the authority this year. Let me say that we have the authority this year to do that move if we chose to. It expires. We got it put into the budget, so it expires, and we'd have to have. Well, did I get it put in the budget, or did we get it put in the language? I'll have to check back, but I do believe that it expires, and we would need to get it extended. And it is something that we want to talk about on our agenda. I do have some ideas about that. I'm not sure about the agenda is the right place, or if it's one of those things that we go right to the delegation, to the member who made it happen for us last time.
Okay. The next question that I had is, to this point, have we done any consideration about potentially including garden spaces for a few of our elementary schools and other schools that don't have them? I've had a lot of advocacy around food access and food growth, specifically at some of our locations here on the south end. So I'm just wondering, would this be an appropriate place to have a conversation, bringing that ask forward directly from the community?
Becky Asensio, can I ask that you address that question, because you are probably more familiar with the elementary ed spec, and I do believe that is an element of the elementary ed spec.
Yes, I believe it is. It's been a little while since I've gone through the details on the ed spec, but I believe that's in there. So on our new schools, that should be put in. And I think if it's not a new school, that's been coming through self-help, those types of projects.
Great, thank you.
I can say, Director Hersey, that we at Daniel Bagley Elementary School, which we just reopened this summer, we do have a garden located there. And I'll check our elementary ed spec and our K-8 ed spec to make sure that is an element identified in the ed spec. I also know, and that in conversations I participated in at Rainier Beach High School, that's been an expression of interest as well.
Yeah, one more quick question. The next question that I had is concerning community health centers. That was a big demand from the Black Education Now rally. And what I would really like to know is, could we also be considering given the space that we have, I don't know if it makes more sense through portables or looking at available space within buildings, but expanding potentially our community health centers to more schools.
Health centers are located at every secondary school within Seattle Public Schools, and they are part of both the middle school and high school educational specifications. They are located in, I won't say a majority of our elementary schools, but they are located in a large number of our elementary schools, but not every elementary school or every K-8 school There it's more based upon population need, and it's not an element of our district-wide elementary or K-8 ed spec. But when we go and develop the site-specific ed spec with the school, those are elements that come up. And I do know, for example, at Northgate Elementary School, we're including space for a health center.
Okay, yeah, that's going to be a huge piece. And just, what I really want to challenge us as a board is to think about how do we provide not only the funding to create these centers, but also how do we open it up to the community and provide access to not only our students but potentially our families. I don't know if we're providing health access to our families as well outside of our students, but how do we potentially make that accessible to some of our populations who are and were furthest away from educational justice, when they matriculated through our school system, to especially given the time and the moment that we're in, I would really just want to challenge us to think about what could we do to go the step further and provide some of those services to the community as well. Thank you.
I
Mack?
heard in the previous, yes, I see you, Director Hampson, just one second. What I'm hearing is some great ideas for guiding principles from you guys. So I'm writing down your thoughts as we're going through this, and we'll be talking a little bit more later. So thank you. Director Hampson, go ahead, please.
Oh, I just wanted to piggyback really quickly on the garden. Believe it or not, I started off in school gardens, and it is incredibly impactful, but incredibly difficult for teachers to utilize via their prior science curriculum at the elementary school level. But also the self-help process is very inequitable because of how onerous it is. You have to have a tremendous amount of time and money and privilege to make that work for your school community. Not to say that schools can't do it, but the level of volunteer requirements are so high. So I'm glad to hear that we're putting those spaces more, readily available into newly built schools. But I think we want to be sure if there's any way we can advocate to make that part of our process more accessible. I think it would be a huge improvement. So, and thank you, Director Hersey, for bringing that up. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Rankin.
Thank you. Yeah, I would echo what Directors Hersey and Hampson just brought up about gardens, and particularly the self-help process and and then the maintenance of the gardens too. I know we have some amazing garden programs, but they do require generally a lot of volunteer hours. I heard you mention, Mr. Podesta, kind of working on lists of, span of life of different, roofing projects and painting and all that kind of thing. And I'm wondering if building accessibility is included in that, because I know new buildings are built to current ADA rules and compliance. But we have a lot of buildings that are not up to code accessibility wise. And so 2 questions are we, I know you and I talked,
Yep.
35 years ago before COVID, or 37 years ago, and about kind of doing an inventory about buildings. So I'm wondering where that is. And then also, because it is an accessibility expense, if there's any state money or other funding to address accessibility projects independent of the capital levies, or if it all would come from the same budget.
So, Director Rankin, accessibility improvements do come from the capital budget. As part of our facilities condition assessment, which we are going through right now, we are doing an update to look at path of travel in our schools, and we'll be getting that information and then providing that information to the school board to look at as part of the improvements that we recommend as part of BTA 5. So we will be getting that information. I do anticipate we'll be making recommendations to enhance path of travel at some of our older schools. With our newer schools, we do design to comply with both the Americans with Disabilities Act and then Washington State barrier-free requirements.
That's great. Thank you. The path of travel, does that end at the front door?
No, path of travel does not, does not.
Okay,
end
so
at the
it's
front door.
path of travel throughout the building.
Throughout the building, into the classroom, and then items in the classroom as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's all I have for right now.
Okay, great. And I'm gonna note that we have about an hour, no, it'll be, yeah, about an hour left because we started 20 minutes late. Unfortunately, I think we're gonna need all of that time. So we're probably gonna be a little bit later. My quick question is about the closed buildings and properties. Those weren't mentioned in the overview. And we have properties that are not currently in operation for educational activities or for administration. Those are also part of things that are considered in the facilities master planning process and therefore potentially the levy, correct?
Correct, Director Mack.
Okay, great. I just want to clarify that those can also be considerations. And so with that, I'd love to go ahead and move through the next however many slides we have and hopefully get some of the other questions directors have answered in that process, and then we'll take questions after that break. So Mr. Best, is that right? Or is this, sorry. Oh my gosh.
It's all right. Yeah.
Director Rivera-Smith, I apologize deeply. I skipped over on the list. I apologize so much. Please go ahead.
Oh, well, I mean, you guys covered everything, so I just don't want you to feel bad later when you realize you skipped me. So, I don't have anything really big to add. I know we're going to talk about guiding principles, and all that later. So most of my questions were revolving around that. So just letting you know. Thanks.
I get to feel bad now instead of later. Thanks. No, I really apologize. Okay, Mr. Best, or is this Ms. Asensio?
Ms. Asensio. And I'll move forward for you, Becky.
Welcome.
Okay, thanks. Hi, good afternoon. I'm Becky Asensio. I'm the planning manager in the Capital Group. I'm going to go over an overview of our levy planning process, and then we'll have questions at the end of this section also. So as a starting point, you've already heard mentioned we've recently revised Board Policy 6901, which is capital levy planning. That requires that levy planning be based on the district's facility master plan. And then we also recently adopted Board Policy 6900, which describes what should be in the facilities master plan, which is what you see on the slide. So the master plan communicates our long-range vision for school facilities that will best support our students' future educational needs. So you can see the contents there of what's in there, and Director Mack just mentioned the list of district buildings and property. That's in the facilities master plan, and that includes all of our properties if they're leased out to other people. So the board policy requires that we update the facilities master plan every 3 years. So we're working on updating that now, and we'll publish that next year in 21. Next slide, please. Richard, can I get the next slide?
I'm trying, Becky,
Oh,
sorry.
it's okay. Thanks. So these are the basic inputs for our levy planning process, the things we consider as we move along. We look at the district needs in each of these areas, and we start with the projects that were identified for the BEX 5 levy, but that didn't get into that levy. So we have a list that we're starting with already. For strategic plan priorities, just to explain that a little bit, we're looking at the preschool space needs to support reading by 3rd grade. And this would be to address the gaps that were described in the early learning pathways work earlier this year. I think you had a work session in June that talked about that. And if you remember, the goal is ultimately to have 2 full-day inclusive preschool classrooms per elementary school. So that's what that bullet point is for. We already mentioned that the facilities condition assessment is underway right now, and I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. Capacity analysis, of course, that's kind of an ongoing thing for my group. That's where we'll determine if there's any capacity needs we need to address in the levy. And then we've talked briefly about technology and academics already, and I better speed up if we're going to get done in an hour. So since we did the BEX 5 levy, there have been some changes both in policies and direction that are going to affect how we plan the BTA 5 levy. That's what's listed on this slide here. Some of these changes are going to affect how we identify projects. So the strategic plan would be one of those. And some of these will affect how we might prioritize the projects later on. And then we are also going to be working with a cost estimating consultant to determine what cost impacts these changes might have in our levy development in the projects. So with 105 schools, it's important that we have a systematic approach to maintaining our buildings and addressing the system conditions. This is an example of life cycle planning for maintaining our buildings, and Richard's already mentioned this. But this would make sure that we're planning ahead for our capital needs. And you can see that there's a regular cycle for the larger systems that need to be maintained every 12 years or so, such as the HVAC, the plumbing, the roofs, et cetera. And these are the types of projects that typically end up on our levies. So we need to keep on schedule to keep the buildings operating over 60 or 70 years. And this just gives you an idea of what that flow is. So one of the ways we plan for maintaining our buildings is to perform a building condition assessment. And I just mentioned that that's underway. Right now, this is being done by a consultant. The condition assessment gives us building system scores that tell us where we may need to address issues. So this information might suggest the need for system improvements like roof replacements or intercom replacements, that type of thing. Or if there's many systems that need updating in a building, that may lead us to suggest renovation or replacement of that building. We have to use a certified assessor every 6 years, and they're certified by OSPI. They score everything throughout the building, including roofs, windows, floorings, finishes. They look at the site, and then they provide a score on a scale of 0 to 100, 100 being excellent. So a brand new building should be getting scores of 100 across the board. And this is reported to OSPI, and they keep track of this. We use this information, we translate it onto a scale of 1 to 5, and that's how we start ranking, one of the elements we use for ranking projects and determining what buildings we need to pay attention to. Also, we're updating our seismic analysis this year, and that's in anticipation of some code changes that are coming. We're also updating a risk analysis and also to get updated costs since the last time we updated the seismic information was in 2012. Other potential building construction projects are driven by capacity needs rather than condition needs. These are typically additions. And as Richard mentioned, we work closely with enrollment planning to analyze those capacity needs looking forward. And then we use, we try to look out over a 10-year horizon, and this is just kind of an information piece that projects that we're looking at for this levy, by the time you design, get permits, et cetera, that can be 1 to 2 years, depending on the size of the projects. And then 2 to 3 years, or 1 to 3 years for construction, again, depending on the size of the project. So if the levy vote is in 2022, a project might not be completed till 2024 or 2026. So we have to look out quite a ways with our enrollment projections that we get from enrollment planning. So our next steps, as far as this goes, is to identify potential capacity issues, look at those strategic plan priorities, and then what we do is develop master plans, which is a test fit. So can we actually build the addition on the site? Are there any site constraints, any zoning constraints that we need to take into account? And then develop the cost estimates for the project budgets. And as Richard mentioned, for these two schools, Sacagawea and Akikurosi, we were able to put design funds within the BEX 5 levy. So we would like to consider these for construction dollars in BTA 5. Just briefly on technology, these are projects and costs are actually developed in a separate process by DOTS. And then they provide that information to us to include in the levy, the grand total. But these are the general categories that are included in their work. So as that planning progresses, we'll start pulling that into our information. And then again, these are the typical projects that are included in the academics and athletics categories. So Richard's already talked briefly about most of those. And so I'm not sure I need to go into much more detail since Richard has already covered most of that. So how we develop a levy list, we get this question quite a bit from when we go out to the community. You see board guiding principles there. Our proposed levy list will be put together using the guidance of the board policy, so the 6901, and the board guiding principles, so your specific guiding principles to us. And then the data that we pull together is based on the building condition assessment, facilities data. Our facilities department knows our buildings inside and out and can tell us where they see issues developing that we need to be aware of and need to take care of. And then capacity issues we just talked about, as well as technology. One-off projects are projects that don't really fit into any of these main categories we've talked about. Some examples from BEX 5 were sound attenuation for open plan concept schools or building and site security equipment. Those were included in the what we call one-off projects. And then this time around, we'll be reviewing all of this with our new capacity enrollment and facility master plan advisory committee. So for our next steps in levy planning, we need to coordinate with a bunch of different departments, very much with facilities and operations, as I just mentioned, also with enrollment planning and DOTS. And then for this levy, also, we want to make sure we're coordinating with these other groups as we go along to make sure that we're addressing equity as we develop the levy projects. And then at the end, we'll develop and refine our project cost estimates so we know the cost of the levy that we might propose. So I'll hand it back to Director Mack for questions.
Yes, thank you. Very good overview. The next section will be about the levy timeline, and then we'll go into the guiding principles after that. So if I can go backwards order this time so I don't forget directors. Director Rivera-Smith, do you have any questions on this section or the overview?
Thank you. Yeah, I have a couple questions. And so I'll try to go maybe in order of the slides you just shared with us. Going back to the priority of having the 2 full-day inclusive preschools per elementary, is that I'm just wondering where that's codified, or if that's kind of just a, offhand, like a side expectation that we don't necessarily have to do, or is it expected from every levy planning?
No, it's not written down. This was a work group that I was in earlier in 2020, which seems like a very long time ago because we would meet in person, actually. And this was work that we did to support the strategic plan priorities. So in working with the early learning group, this would be a long-term goal for them, would be to have 2 preschool rooms in every elementary school. So what I'm saying as far as the levy development is I would like to start looking at that and where we have those gaps. So we did a gap analysis of where we have preschool rooms in our priority schools, so the 13 priority schools, and then a second tier of priority schools that early learning had identified. So just looking at those gaps to see where we might be able to create some additional preschool spaces.
And Director Rivera-Smith, I will note it is codified in our elementary educational specification that we do have space identified to have 2 preschool rooms. So that is articulated in the elementary ed spec. All of our BEX 4 schools and BTA 4 schools that we opened have 2 spaces identified for pre-K and early learning.
That's great. No, I'm glad to hear that. Granted, 2 schools is just 2 schools, because this is about having the full inclusive preschools, which is, you know, I know we want to get to more of those. I mean, that is a priority with early learning. So I just definitely want to support that. So that was actually really great to hear. Thank you, Richard, for that extra information in there. Next question is around the Sacagawea and Alki. You said they were put in last levy for the design, and I'm, you know, obviously it's not a guarantee that they'll make it into the next one, but is that something that, I mean, it seems like is there a reason we wouldn't want to put them in the next levy? Because, you know, it's definitely something we want to finish out.
From my perspective, there'd be no reason why we wouldn't want to put them in the next levy. And the advantage is because we do have 105 schools and only 3 interim sites, we don't have a gap year in those interim sites where they sit empty for a year. Both of those schools are in need of significant modernizations. Neither have been touched for, you know, since they were built back in the 1950s.
Gotcha. Okay, well, thank you for that. And then another question here about the under the allowances for academics and athletics. We do replacements, upgrades, special modifications, etc. Well, you know, we have a high school up here with no athletic spaces, which is Lincoln. So I'm wondering where the spaces for, you know, rebuilding some athletic facilities or space. I know they have indoor, but there's nothing outdoor. And you know the situation there. So that's going to be a concern and some priority for me, at least, looking at that. So would that be something that's being considered, or is that on the radar?
I'll note that with Lincoln High School, what we've been engaged in conversations with Seattle Parks and Rec about the use of the West Woodland fields for the Lincoln High School co-curricular programs. The West Woodland fields are significantly utilized, and so they would like not to lose the use of those fields. As part of BEX 5, we included dollars to construct new fields so Seattle Parks could shift some use to the Fort Lawton site. That is currently caught up in appeals on an environmental impact statement. We have postponed. We had hoped to be under construction in the summer of 2020 with those fields. And at this moment in time, we're projecting that those fields would be constructed in the summer of 2022 as the city of Seattle works through the appeals to their environmental impact statement. But we have been engaged in conversations specifically about Lincoln High School and use of the West Woodlands fields for Lincoln High School's co-curricular programs with Seattle Parks.
Oh yeah, and I know they use it now, and I know they're also heavily used by community groups too and other sports. So I don't know if that's a sustainable answer, but I appreciate that it is that has been facilitated and used. So, but I'll move on because I want to actually just get in one more question, and that's about how does our technology plan? I actually got it out today because I was like, oh yeah, we have this this book on our technology is a 2019-2023 plan. How does that play into the levy planning? Is that used in reference?
So on past levies, I worked very closely with the Department of Technology Services Director in making sure that they are identifying projects and achieving their operational goals with technology and making sure it's included in the levy. Jolynn, I might let you speak to that. Carlos Del Valle started at Seattle Public Schools, and literally within a couple of months, we've gone into the, the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah. So we do have we're going to take the last technology plan, Director Rivera Smith, and kind of have that as one starting point. But we're going to use the ITAC committee to really be that outside advisory group and make recommendations and help staff bring that forward. So ITAC will be used, and part of the technology plan is still in place, but I think that we're looking at a whole new chapter when you consider what COVID means to technology and the way we've had to switch doing business. So what we asked for in BTA 5, I would assume is going to be very different and higher to support the one-to-one, unless we anticipate stopping one-to-one and going back to 2-to-1 at some point. So that'll be some things that we work through with the board and with the ITAC committee. So the technology plan is one starting point, but it's going to have to be significantly amended based on just all of the moves that we had to make because of COVID.
Thank you. That's great to hear. I have no other questions.
Thank you, everyone. Director Rankin.
We have one more section after this? Is that correct?
We do.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna hold for now then.
Okay.
You can go ahead to the next person.
Director Hersey, am I in order?
Yeah, same here. I don't have any questions at this point.
Okay, Director Hampson. Director Hampson.
Excuse me. I think Harris.
Director Harris, I was out of order again. I'm not following my order. Apologies. I'm not sharing very well.
Okay,
Apologies.
it's the ABCs. We go different directions. I have several questions, and not all of them need to be answered here and now, but I would be very specific for Ellie Wilson-Jones this morning and exec committee that we do get follow-up in the minutes and we get follow-up in a Friday memo. My first question is, did I understand correctly, we have not done a seismic safety inventory since 2012?
So that's the,
let me put my questions out there and y'all pick and choose which ones you want to answer now quickly, because I appreciate the time constraints, or the others that should come via Friday memo, but would be mentioned in the minutes specifically. 2, can we add another column to our surveys and guiding principles to the schools that were left on the bubble in previous levies? And I'm thinking about places like North Beach. They came ever so close. Then we changed the criteria, understand why we did, we'll still defend it. But if they've been waiting through 2 or 3 levies, seems to me we need to give that extra weight. 3, with respect to Lincoln and West Woodland and Fort Lawton, I don't recall taking a board vote. I recall many, 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 many discussions and meetings about putting athletic fields there. But again, I don't recall a board vote saying that that's what we wanted to do with the land, athletic fields as opposed to an environmental center. 4, Chief Berge just mentioned the last tech plan. I don't recall the tech plan ever being vetted or approved by the board of directors by the former CIO. And I appreciate that we're going in a different direction now. And 5 would be, I appreciate the need for pre-K, but I also appreciate the competing need for childcare. And did we vote on the ed specs to do 2 pre-K classrooms? Because last I looked, that's the city and other folks' responsibility. Do I appreciate it? Do I want it? Yes. But does this school district need to pay for that, or does that need to be paid by the Seattle city of Seattle? And given the interesting history between SPS and the city of Seattle, I'm having trouble with it. Thank you.
Can I respond to something really quickly about the city of Seattle? The preschool program funds providers. The city does not provide locations for preschool.
And I think that may be the point that Director Harris is making, is that that someone has to absorb those costs somewhere. But with
And our elementary ed specs do have the spaces in there. And I will note, I have seen those spaces be utilized by outside providers, Director Mack, Director Harris, and Director Rankin. And I've also seen those spaces utilized by our Seattle preschool program, SPP. So they've been utilized both ways.
Hi, this is Fred Podesta. May I suggest we answer Director Harris's question about the seismic assessment now and answer the rest in a Friday memo?
That sounds good to me. Director Harris?
I gave you all the option. Have your best shot. Thank you.
So I will note that the seismic assessments were last updated in 2012. We're in the process of updating those at this moment in time.
And what is the ETA on that?
I would say spring of 2021. And Director Harris, I will note, that we've 2005, then there were 2009, and then the 2009 study was the one that was updated in 2012. So, and we've been busy implementing seismic projects as part of BEX 4 because there was approximately 50 schools identified in BEX 4 as part of seismic projects, but we're now going back out. The building codes have changed, and we're now going back out to see how our buildings respond to the new building codes with this seismic
study.
study.
Very much. And again, it's a question of risk management and educating the board up as to where we truly are. Thank you so very much.
Yep, and totally agree with those comments.
Okay, great. Thank you. So Director Hampson.
No questions unless this was the appropriate time for my prior question. I apologize. I had to step away to calm a child for a moment.
I think it might be more appropriate in the next.
Yeah,
section.
that's what I thought. Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
No other questions.
Director
Thanks.
DeWolf. Thank you. Director DeWolf.
I don't have any questions, just clarification. The one thing, obviously, as a fan of this work, the Student Community Workforce Agreement, can you just clarify that basically this agreement or this levy will include that agreement as part of its contracts?
Yes, this levy will include that agreement as part of its contracts going forward.
Awesome, thank you. And my only final thing is just a comment around, I think I know that certainly directors have mentioned this before, but certainly continue to renew my calls publicly here that I think we certainly need somebody in charge of our technology, chief technology officer or the like, and hope we can find a resolution. That's all I have. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Did I miss any directors? Oh, myself. I don't have any questions at this time. If we could go ahead and go into the next section, the timeline, and then if we could skip that I believe there's supposed to be question answered after the timeline, but if we could just move forward. So unless I've got myself out of order on my papers. The next section, Mr. Best.
Just 1 second, Director Mack. I'm having some technical difficulties with my computer moving the slides forward.
Okay. We understand.
Let's see. 26. Slide. Whoops. Can I ask, do you see the right slide? 26? Do you see slide 27 on the timeline?
Nope. Nope. I see it's not shared right now.
Let me go back and stop sharing, and we'll try this again. Share. Oops, share.
It looks like it's starting. There it is. And you just need to make it full screen.
Yep. From current slide. Now, do you
And
see the BTA levy timeline, Director Mack?
Yep.
Thank you.
Perfect.
So this is the timeline that we have developed, and we did pass out a more detailed timeline that I will not go back to look at just because of some of the technical difficulties I'm having with my computer tonight. But we are hoping to get the board guiding principles in January of 21. Obviously, we are going to have to develop a communications plan as to what that looks like. Then we will definitely have to consider this COVID pandemic. While we've become much more skilled at these types of presentations, we previously have done a fairly significant outreach to all 5 geographical regions, both in the spring prior to your informing really the community of the board's guiding principles, and then again in the fall, right prior to your finalizing the list of projects that goes onto the levy. And that may look different because of this COVID pandemic, and we are going to be working with some consultants and helping us discuss what community engagement looks like, and we'll be looking for your input and feedback as well. The summer of 2021, we'll be refining the project levy list. We're hoping, as Becky has already alluded to have input from the capacity enrollment analysis and facilities master plan advisory committee. We also in the past have presented these levies to our BEX BTA oversight committee, who have had and given great feedback. We'll refine the project list in the summer, and then in the fall of 21, we will go back out and have a conversation again with the community, and then propose a final levy list. We do keep you informed each step of the way with the conversations that we hear and the discussions that we've had with the community. You need to take a vote really no later than the end of November, because we have filing requirements in December in order to have a special election in February. And so that's just an overview of the timeline for the BTA 5 capital levy. And Director Mack, in lieu of pausing here, I think we should go into the board guiding principles.
Yeah, let's go ahead and move into the next section, the project ranking, and is that Ms. Asensio that was going to cover these next few slides?
It is. Becky?
Okay.
Yes, hi. So I mentioned this earlier, Board Policy 6901 is capital levy planning. That actually requires that we score and rank the proposed projects, and the words are right there. You can see them. we have to submit that to the school board for approval as part of the levy planning process. And then as we revised the policy 6901, we added in that equity needs to be taken into account throughout the planning process. And again, you can see the words that are pulled from the revised policy. So can I get the next slide?
I'm trying, Becky, sorry. My key.
Maybe you need a new machine.
Yep. Let's see.
Here we go. So as far as levy priorities, board policy 6901 does list some priorities, and that's what's bulleted here. So we do take
to a special Valentine to Ellen from.
I've got some
Mr. Lorimer, I'm not sure if you realize you're not on mute.
Stu, can you mute? Thank you. Okay, thank you. So these are the priorities that are already spelled out in the policy. So we already use these. And as we mentioned a few times tonight already, the board guiding principles will provide us more specific priorities. And we would like to have those, if we could, by January. And so on the next slide, if you can get there, Richard, is a summary of what was provided to us for the BEX 5 planning process. This is just a high-level summary, and if Richard can switch to the actual board guiding principles, they're available on our website. They're also in your packet, and Director Mack would like to discuss these further. But these are actually what was provided for the BEX 5 planning process.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Asensio. And what's going to go up on the screen is in the packet. It is what was adopted by the board for the BEX 5 as our guiding principles. We did this in open public meeting, revised and debated how we wanted to ensure that we were setting the priorities. And Ms. Asensio is going to talk after we look at this on the screen, and hopefully Richard can get it up here. You have it in your packet as well, so you can
see
read
it,
more
Director?
in depth. Mine's a little slow, but I see it coming. Yes, there it is. So if you can scroll up so we can kind of see the big bulleted points. But I just wanted to bring your attention to the words on the screen and the highlighted bulleted, the highlighted titles are kind of the what's the bucket of priority, and then underneath it it expands on what we actually mean in that regard. I don't think we have time here tonight to wordsmith this document, and I'm looking for input when we talk about it here in a little bit and we have board comments. I'll be looking for input on a kind of process for us as a board to go about how we want to ensure that we're putting all, the right priorities forward, and that we agree on those priorities and the language in these principles. Additionally, if there's, I made note of a number of things that I heard directors already talking about that may resonate with all of us for principles. I, like Leslie, feel very proud of the process that we went through for BEX 5 in terms of setting the guiding principles, and then also doing the process of scoring and having the overarching framework of ensuring educational and racial equity, and that the scoring process actually additionally supported us in those efforts. And Becky will talk about that in a little bit. I also just want to make note or directors in their thinking of principles. In the case of the BEX 5 levy, the original thought was 1 million. And there was nervousness about going out for 1.4. I'm sorry, 1 billion. Not, do I have my zeros right? I don't, I never do. I apologize for that. 1.4 billion, which is a lot of money. The nervousness about whether or not we could pass that levy always exists. And the reality is that when you look at all of the conditions assessment, facilities master plan, and the actual need in the district, we needed and still do need 2 or 3 times that amount to actually do everything in the district. So we have those constraints as well to think about in terms of how much we can put onto the levy and pass it and meet our priorities. So with that, I just wanted to kind of give that context for the guiding principles and look forward to working together as a board to have those be as clear as possible, because it helps guide what staff is going to be putting together as the levy. And Becky, if you could go ahead and move into the presentation around the scoring and how that plays out and how that did play out, then we can take questions and comments after that.
Okay, yes, thank you. Well, Richard brings the presentation back up. I will say that we actually use the board guiding principles to develop our scoring and ranking criteria. So there's a direct correlation, and you're going to see that in a second when we get to the next slide, which we are here. And at that time, we had a facilities master plan task force that they reviewed the scoring criteria that we developed to align with the board guiding principle and advised on those. And so this time we anticipate using the CEA FMP to help us review those scoring criteria. I'll also note that last time that our research and evaluation department did a lot of work with us in coming up with how to do that scoring and ranking, especially in applying the equity tier scores. That had not been done before. The BEX 5 levy was the first time that we had to apply, or that we applied an equity score and then weighted the scores. So I'm going to show you how we did that for BEX 5 on the next slide. I know this is tiny, but this is just to give you an idea of all the individual elements that we pulled together in order to come up with ranks and scores, or scores and then ranks. So the darker colors that you see, educational adequacy, building conditions, health, safety, and security, align with the guiding principles that we received from the board. And then what we did is we developed the lighter colors are the individual scores that we used to come up with a score to meet those criteria. So for example, we were asked for health and safety, the Facilities Master Plan Advisory Task Force, talked a lot about indoor air quality as a measure of health and safety. So we came up with a way to get a score for that. So you'll note on here, it's a scale of 1 to 5. So for scoring and ranking, that's what's traditionally been used in the levy scoring, with 5 being a bad score, so poorest condition, and 1 being a good score or best condition. So on the next slide, you can see that these scores that were in the darkest colors have been pulled over together, and this is where the weighting factors were applied. And again, this was the research and evaluation department pulled this together for us. So we had the scores for the main categories, which align with the main categories of the guiding principles. Those were given equal weight, and then the equity score was giving a larger weight. And that came up with an overall rank that is on the far right of the screen. And so for BTA 5, we, again, when we get the guiding principles from the board, we will work on developing scoring criteria to align with those guiding principles. And then we'll work with the advisory committee to advise us on that also.
Thank you. Actually, if you want to go ahead and flip back to that sheet, because the chart that you just had, just one slide back. And with that, I'll ask Director Hampson to go ahead and go first. Your question was around, do we have an assessment of building conditions and where, et cetera? So that column, the building conditions one, is from the evaluation that's done. And if you have further question there and any other question, please. Actually, before I push this off, I actually want to frame it to ask that directors do two things here. Ask any clarifying questions that you have, and also provide any thoughts on process or specific elements of the guiding principles that you'd like to see. I know that's a lot to ask, but I'd like to see if we can get that input here. Director Hampson.
And Director Mack, this is President Wolf. Just we're about 10 minutes till the technical end of the agenda, so just clarifying.
Yeah, I know, and I think we're gonna. I feel like it's probably gonna run a little longer, unfortunately, but appreciate the time check. Director Hampson.
Yes. So just as you started talking, one of my family members started trying to talk to me. It's a chaotic time to have a meeting in my house tonight. The question that I had, and I'm looking at this and trying to determine where this is. I don't know if it's under building conditions, average, that score. Is that what you're talking about in reference to my question about the kind of
yeah, the question about which buildings are, falling apart or are in decent condition, like how on the scale of how good of a condition it's in or how bad of it is. That's the building condition. And that data can be delineated by area of the city as well.
And then, so what I would ask about that is, does it account for the kind of the duration of that? So 4 factors is, so Northgate is like the worst condition, is that right?
So Northgate overall is, yes,
Well,
I have to look at the numbers. Yes, yeah. So if, with a score of a 4,
right,
their building condition score, it would indicate, well, no, Alki is a 4.1. So, but yes, that's the general idea, that the higher number is the worst condition.
And that's there are 4 factors that go into that, and I can't see that. But is one of those factors the length of time that it has been in relatively poor condition? I mean, let's just say anything above or 3 or more is poor condition or less than adequate condition. How, is there something that weights it if it's been a longer period of time? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, we did not do that with this ranking criteria. I think it was based on pure condition. So if your building hasn't been touched in 20 years, but you're still in good condition, then we would have moved on to something that was in poorer condition.
Right. Yeah, I think there's, I'm just curious if there is any benefit or we definitely hear from community at times about kind of how long something has waited to be redone. And so I don't know how those things are weighted against each other, the relative condition of the building, if it's 3 and sort of very slow, it's had a longer life.
Yeah, so in my looking through all the data that we have, that they naturally rise to the top of the condition list. It's not obvious. There's a lot of data that goes into this, but those schools that are in poor condition, they will rise to the top. We have a giant spreadsheet that lists all the scores for all the systems, and you can start to see the trends that show up where, so like a Northgate might have 4s and 5s in a lot of their systems, which gives them a worse overall score for their building.
Okay. Okay, I'll pass it on to other directors for now. Thank you. Was there something else you wanted me to comment on in terms of the other criteria, or Director Mack?
I apologize. I was totally muted and I was talking. Yes, the two questions that I would like to have directors weigh at least a little bit in on is process for building the guiding principles. If you have any thoughts on that, we need to get it done by January. And additionally, if there's any specific elements that rise to the top for you that you want to flag at this point. Those are the other things, and I can come back to you if you want to think on that for a second. I can move to another director.
Yeah, go ahead. I have some general ideas, but I don't think I'm not burning to share them. So I'm not feeling inspired by them. So let's hear from other directors.
Okay, great. Director DeWolf?
Yep. Thank you, Director Mack. For as far as things I'd like to see, sorry, let me back up. My recommendation is we hold another work session as we did in October of 2018 to clarify. I don't know if that's actually what this is from. I'm just looking at the date here on that presentation. But when we had our basically our guiding principles conversation about BEX 5, I felt that was really great, both activity and also conversation with directors. And I'm so excited we obviously landed on equity as one of our scoring tiers. So that would be one thing I'd recommend as far as maybe next steps. So we're not maybe trying to do it rushed here. And then as far as things I'd like to see, I feel like I was really, really grateful for agility and flexibility during our BEX 5 conversations, particularly being able to add the equity tier, which I don't know if a lot of folks on this call know, but that was one of what I would say was one of our prouder moments for BEX 5. At least I know the 3 directors on this call. I felt that. So I want to kind of take a little bit more time in thinking about the moving forward, any other guiding principles, and I'll return back when we have our work session.
I'll second the need for another work session to have a complete conversation. I appreciate you saying that. So the next in line is Director Harris.
I would second both what Director Hansen had to say and Director DeWolf. And for those of y'all that weren't involved with the BEX 5, we stopped and recalculated based on equity considerations. And frankly, it was a little awkward to start and stop, but I'm really proud of where we landed up and how we landed up. I'll restate my request that we add another column for those schools that needed capital assistance that had been on the bubble for more than 1 or 2 or 3 cycles. I think that we could add places that have caused us a great deal of angst. Rainier Beach High School, for instance. North Beach Elementary School, for instance. I think we need to be aware of our past. And if we can't fix it, we at least need to own it and embrace it. Again, I will add that pre-K is a laudable goal, whether or not we are the folks that build the capital to house it, as opposed to, say, for instance, childcare, is a conversation I think that we need to have. And having another work session and with all the different threads of community engagement before January is going to be a real hat trick. I am more than willing. This is all critically important work. Last, I want to know, when are we finally going to have the conversation about changing feeder schools to Asa Mercer? We've been kicking the can, so to speak, now for several years. Everything gets in the way. Couldn't do it this year, couldn't do it last year, etc. It is not fair, it is not nice, and it is not equitable. Thank you.
Director Harris, I'll just update you a little bit on the process around Mercer. That's being proposed to have some changes for the next school year, and that's in process now, and the community is being engaged. So that has started the conversation, so that the boundary changes that are upcoming that we need to vote on every year in January, that is one of the things that is on the table. So,
Are there other significant boundary changes that are coming up? Because when we vote in January, we should have started in July. COVID-19 notwithstanding, we keep having this same conversation about lead time.
I second your comments and concerns. Director Hersey, do you have any questions or comments or thoughts on the process for guiding principles or specific ideas or questions about?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my main question would be like, having not gone through this process before, I'm struggling to wrap my mind around like what is a guiding principle for this process. Could you give me an example? Because I'm really struggling, because I hear folks kind of all over the place with what they're referring to, and I'm really trying to zero in on like what is a guiding principle and how is it utilized so that I can give adequate feedback.
Yeah, so Mr. Best, can you pull back up the actual guiding principle document so that Mr. Hersey can see that?
Director
language?
Hersey.
Yeah, Director Hersey.
Stop sharing. Share.
While that's happening, Director Hersey, did you have another question or comment or thought, or?
No, not really. Not at this phase. I'm still just trying to make sure that I fully understand what this process even looks like. I mean, for a new director coming into this is helpful, but also kind of like, you know, a lot to process at this moment. So I'm really just trying to wrap my mind around what exactly we're being asked, because what it seems like is kind of, and correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that your question is how do we kind of bring these guiding principles, or at least get to an endpoint to where we are decided on this guiding principles, especially from a community aspect. Is that what your question is? Or are you more so referring to like our feedback on like what the process should look like to getting to an endpoint more broadly? I think that's where I'm kind of a little confused, because I'm really just trying to see and figure out what in the past has been our process of bringing this back to community and getting their feedback on it before we call it good. So if somebody could provide some context for that, that would be helpful while I read what has been pulled up on the screen here.
So the context of the process in the past, so last time we did this, it's the board's responsibility per the policy, et cetera, to set the guiding principles. And it's our responsibility as board directors to consider our constituents' feedback and perspectives when we're setting the overarching principles. And, you know, my thought, you know, related to your questions around community engagement is that perhaps there should be some sort of intersection, a feedback loop with community, and given bandwidth, I'm not sure exactly how that looks, but I understand it's a concern, and I think it's also important to have the feedback loop and also the buy-in on the end of what happens at the very end when we actually have a levy produced, that it meets the guiding principles, but the guiding principles should be matching what community also is interested in. And I don't know exactly what that mechanism should be at this stage, and so I am looking for feedback, and maybe we don't have to answer it tonight, but I know that having community feedback and engagement in setting the guiding principles, even though it's our responsibility, I would like to see some mechanism for that as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think that not ultimately, but immediately, what's coming to mind for me is really thinking about how does this align back to our value of targeted universalism, and just being really explicit on how this levy strategy kind of advances our strategic plan. The way that I see that happening one of the ways that I see that happening at least is through community gardens and access to food with the caveat that we are able to support it to the extent that Director Hampson mentioned. But I think we all need to really chew on this a little bit and come back and have that conversation, because we really, I don't know if we were necessarily prepared to have a conversation around how do we really thread this needle for community. I think for me personally, I need to go back and consult with the folks that are that are in my community in D7 before I feel before I feel comfortable giving any type of guidance or feedback on this.
Okay, great, thank you. It sounds like another work session will be important and helpful, and then having some heads up around how to engage community in the meantime. Thank you.
That's what I would say.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, Director Rankin, thoughts?
Thanks. Yeah, I just to sort of add on to what the discussion just was, I mean, generally, what the reality is that there's more things we want and need for different communities than we have funding for. So the guiding principles is really helping us decide how do we decide what to put into this levy and what has to wait. So in 2018, actually, can somebody go to the slide that has the scores, please? That we were on a moment ago. In 2018, the feedback from community to add an equity score, I was involved in advocacy around that as a community member, and the kind of awkwardness there was that it wasn't awkward for me, but me personally, I felt really strongly about it. But my kids, the school my kids were go to, I was basically advocating to delay work done at that school because of the equity factor. When I was campaigning, it was actually awkward because North Beach is also a very similar era, similar condition to Wedgwood, where my kids were at elementary school. And in campaigning, one of their biggest issues was wanting to replace their building, and I was like, I kind of advocated to having you wait. But anyway, so the questions that I have are the equity weighting is critical, and I am wondering about the relationship between the equity index and the health and safety factor, and if a school has how unsafe is unsafe, because that's the one area that for me, regardless of the school demographic, if we have a building that is unsafe for students, that's important. Regardless of, so I don't know. I'm wondering, I guess, how those things relate to each other, so we're not in a position where we're okay with some kids being in a seismically unsound building or something like that, if that makes sense. So I'm wondering about that relationship, and then I am also curious about the air quality scores, if because of COVID, there's been more information and more changes and upgrades and whatnot in buildings to address ventilation, if that changes any of these scores. Or if there's...
So this is Becky, and I'll start with the last question first. And since these scores are based on the condition of a system, unless there's been an upgrade between when we are, 2018 and today, nothing in the score would have changed. So it.
Okay. Well,
right.
so it has more to do with well, so I guess the important thing would be then, in the context of COVID, to make sure that this data is used accurately by the greater community who might not be part of all these conversations and come across this and think, oh my gosh, this building is not safe.
Right, and so that would be how we communicate.
So yeah,
what the data that we'll get from the building condition assessment. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it just tells us relatively, and what I've seen is if they were to come across something that was significantly bad, they flag that to us immediately. So.
Okay, I just, I always think data, of course, is super important and so useful and valuable for people to know, but at the same time, without the context, people don't, could use it in ways that's not helpful.
Yes, that's true. Yes. And then as far as the relationship between the health and safety score and the equity score, that would be maybe something that the board would provide guidance to us if you wanted us to change the weighting factors. So because of COVID, if we thought maybe health and safety should get a little bit more weight, that might be something that we consider as we do this final calculation. So right now, this was all equal. Yeah.
I think I would need to understand more about what those numbers represent.
Right.
Because, there's a certain amount of risk in an old building that could actually be fine. But, if we're talking about kindergarten classrooms in a cinder block basement, that's not super great.
Right, and that kind of detail is what we talked about with the task force at that time, and then now when we get to that point with this levy, we'll bring it to the CEA FMP advisory committee.
Okay, great. Eden, that didn't specifically answer my kind of guiding principles, but I think maybe give some idea.
Yeah, and I think that we need to have a longer conversation too about it, but I think that gives a foray into it. And also, yeah, I appreciate that. Chandra, I do see your hand up again. I do want to go ahead and, if you don't mind, have Director Rivera Smith first, and then I'll come back to you if that's okay.
Of course.
Thank you. Director Rivera Smith.
Thank you. I think well, that was one of my questions there was kind of covered there by Eliza was, well, what do the numbers mean as far as the scoring goes? Because equity, there is definitely an intersection between the equity and the health and safety, and just wanted to understand what we're counting as factors in there. And I look at the BEX 5 guiding principles, and I think they definitely carry over into this next levy planning. But also just, again, fleshing out what they each, how they're, what we look at in each of them. It's like the environment and financial sustainability. We're currently, Director DeWolf and I are working on a resolution for 100% clean energy. So there's going to be a lot of intersections that we want to come into play and look at as we do the planning here. And so I appreciate that we're going to have a work session. I think that we'll have definitely time to come check in with our communities and build that out. And I look forward to having a little throwdown with Director Harris regarding preschools. Thank you.
And just quickly, I'll say that I do think that it'll be helpful to have that and have this further discussion, and that we need to come up with a kind of a deliberative process of, besides also, we'll have the CMP also reviewing this, but also how community can engage. And so Director Hampson.
Yeah, thank you. And I like that. I think I just heard you agree that we need to see Directors Rivera Smith and Harris have a throwdown about preschool. If I followed that correctly. So that made my night.
That could be entertaining.
But it is I actually agree that there's a good important conversation there. It is, seeing us deal with what is truly a great benefit to have childcare in our schools, but then the extent to which that limits us now and limits our openness to preschool. It's like we just can't keep sometimes I imagine that our buildings, become just this massive thing because schools continue to be the only place where families are getting, and particularly children, are service points for wraparound services. And so it's a critical conversation that we need to have. And I need, regardless of where the funding comes from. Okay, so let's see if I can remember what I wanted to say. Dang it, the throwdown really threw me.
You're so excited thinking about that, you can't concentrate.
That's okay. And you can circle back, I think, if that's okay, because I'm sure, if it's about the principles and how we actually do the scoring, all of that, I think that.
Oh, it is. Thank you. Yes, it is. You want me to save it?
If it's quick.
Oh, it's quick. I just, I'm one of those people that wants to see like how we got the bell curve. And so the weighting, I am interested in the weighting, not because I want to get into it, but like that last thing that you said, Rebecca, was very interesting to me, about, looking at some of that weighting in response to COVID. So yes, I am interested in that, trying to keep it at the appropriate level. But these are, at a certain level point, these start to just look like a bunch of raw numbers, and it's hard to digest when we don't know like what's the thinking that went into. I so appreciate all of this, and I do appreciate the prior board's work that created this scenario to shift all of this, and I just want to give good feedback. So that weighting conversation is something that I'm interested in. Thank you.
That sounds great. And I didn't miss anyone, did I? Okay. I don't have any further comments at this point. I think the next slide is just a quick overview from Mr. Podesta on the next steps. And I want to just say right now, if it's okay, since we had pretty robust conversation, not to have any more comments after that, even though they were planned. Look forward to having further conversation and appreciate you taking all the time and going over tonight in order to do this. So Mr. Podesta, if you want to cover the next steps part.
Well, clearly we have work to do on the priorities, that we'll arrange a longer work session around that specific topic to establish the board priorities. And then these are not necessarily in sequential order, but we have we will use the equity toolkit in concert with those priorities, since equity is a major dimension of those, to guide the planning process. We'll gather technical details, site assessments, capacity issues, and other things to develop and tee up discrete projects, and then work on an outreach and communications plan, and keep circling back with the board. We are working with the board office to establish a schedule of work sessions to continue on with this process.
Excellent. And with that, I appreciate everyone tonight being a part of this conversation, and look forward to working further on this topic, and hopefully we can pass another levy. Thank you to the voters for all of their support continuously, and hopefully we can continue to maintain that. And I appreciate your engagement as a board together, and the district staff on coming up with the best package to serve our students' needs. And with that, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Or do I need to hand it back to Director DeWolf to do that?
No, you're okay, Director Mack, go ahead.
Okay, great. Then I'll adjourn the meeting at 6:39. And thank you, everyone, especially the staff, for putting all of this together. And have a wonderful night.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.